The African savanna goes quiet the way it always does right before something terrible happens. Not a gradual hush, but a sudden total stillness, as if the grass itself is holding its breath. Under the open sky, hidden in a stand of tall, sun-bleached grass, a small band of early humans lies pressed together. 7 of them, maybe 8. The night has turned bitterly cold, and there's a fear moving through the group that doesn't have a name yet, so they do what frightened creatures have always done. They hold on to each other. One of them is awake. He's the youngest in the group, no older than 10 or 11, and in his small, calloused fist he's gripping a flake of stone he's chipped to a rough edge. He's holding it so tightly the blood has drained out of his knuckles. He doesn't move. He barely breathes. 40 meters off, somewhere in the grass, something enormous is stirring. Something with a strength he can't measure and a pair of yellow eyes that catch what little light there is like a pair of dying embers. The predator is waiting for exactly one mistake. A shifted leg, a snapped twig, the rustle of a body turning over in its sleep. That's all it will take. By morning, everyone in this group may be dead except the boy holding the stone. And in a single night, a 10-year-old child will have become the oldest living member of his entire people. Because there will be no one left alive who is older than he is. It sounds like fiction. It isn't. Roughly 1.8 million years ago, a species of early human walked the earth that nature seemed almost determined to erase. A species whose members lived, on average, only a little past their 12th birthday. Where we'd call 90 a remarkably long life today, simply reaching 13 was close to a miracle for them. Think about what that does to a society. No grandparents, no long-lived elders sitting by the fire passing down 40 years of accumulated knowledge about which plants were poison or where the water ran safe. Whatever this species knew about staying alive, it had to be learned fast, taught urgently, and passed on in a window of only a few years before the teacher, too, was gone. And yet this fragile, short-lived species was our direct ancestor. If they hadn't clawed their way through that nightmare, night after night, there's a real chance none of us would be here to tell the story. This is that story. The predators that hunted this species almost to nothing, and the one strange, dangerous habit that saved it. And it starts, as so much of what we know about our origins does, at a dig site in East Africa in 1960. The place was Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. The site was already well known to fossil hunters. Just a year earlier, Mary Leakey had pulled a robust, big-jawed skull out of the same gorge, a specimen the world would come to know as Paranthropus boisei. So, when her 20-year-old son Jonathan was out digging alongside his parents Louis and Mary that scorching afternoon in 1960, everyone already knew this ground had more to give up. What Jonathan's small handpick struck that day would end up rewriting a chapter of human history anyway. Carefully, over hours of painstaking work, the team exposed a lower jawbone with 13 teeth still sitting in it, then 2 fragments of a skull. Then 21 small bones from a hand and wrist. Piece by piece back in the lab, scientists reassembled a partial skeleton. And when they finally saw what they had, they were floored. The creature was unmistakably human-like. Its hand, especially, was built almost exactly like ours. But it wasn't a modern human either. It sat in that strange, unfinished space between ape and man. Potassium-argon dating placed the bones at roughly 1.8 million years old. And the jaw held one more secret. The wisdom teeth had never come in, and under examination, the growth plates in the wrist bones hadn't yet fully hardened into solid bone. In medical terms, that means one thing. Whoever this was, they died at 11 or 12 years old, a child. But the hand told an extraordinary story of its own. This creature could touch its thumb to the tip of every other finger, the kind of fine, precise grip that on this planet belongs to humans and nothing else. It's the grip that lets us hold a needle, strike a match, or shape a stone into a blade. A scan of the skull found a brain somewhere between 600 and 710 cubic centimeters, smaller than ours, but a couple hundred cubic centimeters bigger than a chimpanzee's brain from the same era. The team named this new species Homo habilis, handyman, a man skilled with his hands. The fossil itself picked up an affectionate nickname among the excavators, Johnny's Child, after the young man who found it. For a while, that single skeleton got treated as a strange outlier, a child who'd simply had terrible luck. But over the following decades, as more Homo habilis remains kept turning up across East Africa, a far darker pattern started to take shape. By the early 2000s, paleoanthropologists had recovered more than 24 sets of Homo habilis remains from sites across the region. One skeleton can be an accident. 24 start to look like a rule. So researchers turned to the one part of the body that survives 1 million years underground. Better than almost anything else: teeth. Bone can hide a lot about how long its owner lived. Teeth are much harder to fool. Every time an animal chews, the hard white enamel wears down at a measurable, fairly predictable rate. A couple of millimeters a year on the canines in a modern human, less on the other teeth. That gives you a rough age at death. But scientists layered something more precise on top of it: dental micro-wear analysis. Every bite of tough, fibrous, primitive food leaves microscopic scratches on the enamel, and under a powerful electron microscope, those scratches show up almost like the growth rings of a tree. The more worn the tooth, the older the individual. Cross-reference that against the fossil record of related species and what's known about the climate and diet of the period, and you get an age estimate you can actually stand behind. Running that analysis across a wide sample of Homo habilis teeth produced a result that reportedly left more than one research team quietly unsettled. The average age at death came out to somewhere around 12.8 years old. The overwhelming majority died between 10 and 14. Out of the whole sample, only one individual had made it anywhere close to 25. Everyone else was gone before they'd even reached what we'd now think of as their teenage years. And that's before accounting for infants and toddlers at all, since their bones are too soft and small to have survived nearly 2 million years in acidic soil. If anything, the true picture is worse than 12.8 years, not better. Sit with that for a second. This was a species, a society, in which a 13 or 14-year-old wasn't just an adult. They were the elder, the senior member of the group. Reaching 18 would have sounded like a legend, the kind of story told about some distant, half-mythical relative. Here's what makes that number so strange, though. Homo habilis wasn't stupid. They were napping stone into cutting tools. Their brains were bigger than any hominin species that had come before them. So, why couldn't they survive past 13? The answer has less to do with what was inside their skulls and everything to do with what had happened to the world around them. Roughly 2.5 million years ago, Earth's climate went through a dramatic shift. Slow, enormous changes in the planet's tectonic plates altered global weather patterns, and rainfall that had once been reliable across huge stretches of Africa began drying up. The thick, unbroken forest canopy that had sheltered the ancestors of Homo habilis for millions of years, that had let them sleep safely up in the branches, well out of a predator's reach, started dying back. Something close to 70% of that forest eventually disappeared, replaced by wide-open, sun-scorched grassland, the savanna. The Pleistocene, the age we still casually call the Ice Age, had begun. For a small, tree-adapted primate, it turned Africa into a trap with no walls and nowhere left to hide. Coming down out of the trees wasn't a lifestyle choice for Homo habilis. It was closer to being pushed at gunpoint onto open ground, because there was no cover left in any direction for miles. And that open ground belonged to some of the most efficient killing machines in the history of life on Earth. Physically, Homo habilis had almost nothing going for them. They stood barely 4 feet tall on average, shorter even than their own ancestors, the Australopithecines. Their brains, bigger than a chimp's, still weren't wired for split-second group tactics in a crisis. No claws worth mentioning, no fangs, nothing sharp enough to matter in a fight. And running wasn't much of an option either. Modern humans cover huge distances because our feet have a springy arch built to absorb the shock of every stride. And Homo habilis simply didn't have that yet. They could manage maybe a mile or two before giving out, topping out at somewhere around 20 to 25 kilometers an hour on a good day. Now picture that same slow, half-finished creature sharing a 10-kilometer stretch of ground with half a dozen different apex predators, every one of them 2 or 3 times faster, and you start to understand what daily life actually looked like. Not the occasional close call, but a near-constant, grinding calculation of risk every time the group needed to move, drink, or sleep. Pachyrhinocuta, an enormous prehistoric hyena, hunted in large, disciplined packs, with jaws strong enough to crack a rhinoceros leg bone like a biscuit. And unlike hyenas today, they often didn't wait for a kill to finish dying before they started eating it. Supposedly safe up in the branches waited Dinophilis, a saber-toothed cat roughly 1.5 times the size of a modern leopard, seemingly built for one purpose above all others: hunting primates. Its long, curved canines weren't shaped for a throat bite. They were shaped to punch straight through a skull into the brain underneath. Researchers once found the skull of a Paranthropus, a cousin lineage to our own, with 2 deep puncture wounds in it lining up almost perfectly with the spacing of Dinophilis's canines. And because Dinophilis could climb, running for a tree bought you nothing. Water wasn't any safer. Along the riverbanks, an 8-meter crocodile known as Crocodilus thorbjarnarsoni lay in ambush just beneath the surface, its bite estimated at somewhere north of 16,000 newtons, enough that anything caught in it was never coming back to dry land. Fossilized Homo habilis foot bones have turned up with puncture marks that match this animal's teeth almost exactly. A single handful of drinking water could cost you your life. Out in the open grass, another ambush predator waited under cover, Meganterion, something like a cross between a jaguar and a saber-toothed tiger, with dagger-like canines 4 to 5 inches long. It didn't chase. It hid in the brush for hours and struck once. A single bite through the windpipe and the carotid artery together. No struggle, no wasted motion, just one perfect kill. And if, somehow, an individual survived all of that, there was still Panthera leo fossilis, an early lion nearly twice the size of lions alive today, close to 500 kilograms of muscle, almost always hunting in a coordinated pack at speeds Homo habilis could never outrun. Even the sky wasn't neutral. A giant prehistoric forerunner of today's African crowned eagle patrolled overhead with a wingspan close to 2 meters, wider than a tall adult human is tall, circling in near silence before folding its wings and dropping to snatch a small primate or a hominin infant straight off the ground. In South Africa, researchers examining the skull of a young Australopithecus child known as the Taung child, who died around age 3, found 2 puncture marks in the eye sockets that several paleoanthropologists have argued match the talons of exactly this kind of raptor. Ground, trees, water, sky. There was nowhere that didn't belong to something that wanted to eat you. But the cruelest part of the Homo habilis story isn't any single predator. It's that their own bodies had been left half-finished by evolution, like nature had started building something and simply walked away partway through. Their fingers weren't curved enough for a life spent hanging from branches the way a true tree dwellers are. But their feet weren't efficient enough for serious ground travel either. Their shoulder blades sat at an odd in-between angle, not quite right for fast climbing, not quite right for balanced running. They were caught between 2 ways of living, excelling at neither, in a landscape full of animals that had spent millions of years being perfected for exactly this. So how did a species this outmatched avoid simply vanishing, the way so many creatures of that era did? The answer is an old habit, and a dangerous one: scavenging. Homo habilis worked out, probably through nothing more than desperate trial and error, that fighting these predators head-on for a fresh kill was suicide. So they waited instead for the lions or hyenas to finish and move off, then moved in on whatever was left. It sounds simple. In practice, it was nearly as dangerous as hunting outright. The smell of a fresh carcass didn't just draw in Homo habilis, it drew in every hungry predator for miles. Stealing meat from under a pack of giant hyenas, or in full view of a resting saber-tooth, wasn't something one person could pull off alone. It took real coordination. Someone to locate the carcass, someone to pull attention away from it, someone fast enough to crack a bone and grab the marrow before the group had to run, and everyone ready to flee together the instant things turned. That necessity, the sheer impossibility of doing this solo, is very likely what handed Homo habilis the one advantage no predator on the savannah could match: cooperation. More eyes meant more warning. More hands meant meat and marrow gathered faster. Bodies standing together meant a threat a lone predator might think twice about testing. This pressure appears to have reshaped their brains in a specific way. When researchers scan the inside of Homo habilis skulls to reconstruct the shape of the brain that once filled them, one region stands out: Broca's area, the part of the modern human brain most closely tied to producing language. In Homo habilis, it shows real signs of unusual development for the time. That doesn't mean they were holding conversations the way we do, but it strongly suggests they'd built something more sophisticated than a simple animal alarm call, a shared vocabulary of sound, tone, glance, and gesture precise enough to coordinate a scavenging raid. Who breaks the bone? Who watches the grass? Which direction the danger is likely to come from? That crude communication system may be the single biggest reason this species didn't disappear the way so many others did. Cooperation alone couldn't power a growing brain, though. Brain tissue is metabolically expensive. In a modern human, it eats up roughly a fifth of the body's entire energy budget, just sitting there thinking. Leaves, fruit, and the occasional scrap of raw meat weren't going to cover a bill that steep. So Homo habilis found the richest, most overlooked food source on the whole savannah: bone marrow. Big predators would strip a carcass of meat and abandon the skeleton, but even a giant hyena's crushing jaw couldn't always break into the thickest, densest, long bones. Those became Homo habilis' specialty. They gathered rounded river stones and knapped them against each other to form a crude cutting edge, then used those tools to smash open the bones other predators had left behind, extracting the fat and protein-rich marrow inside. It was the first time in the history of life on this planet that any animal had deliberately manufactured a tool for its own benefit. Archaeologists call this early tool-making tradition Older One technology, named for the gorge where it was first identified. That marrow was, in a very real sense, prehistoric superfood, exactly the fuel a rapidly growing brain needed, and exactly what let Homo habilis slowly outthink a world that so badly outmatched it physically. For nearly 1 million years, this brutal arrangement continued, a relentless, grinding filter with harsh climate and hungry predators on one side and Homo habilis' fragile, half-finished body on the other. Every individual too slow to keep up, too careless to catch a warning, too unwilling to cooperate, got removed from the gene pool almost immediately, usually inside someone's stomach. What survived generation after generation were the sharpest minds and the most cooperative instincts the species had. Out of that unrelenting pressure, somewhere around 1.9 million years ago, a new and dramatically more capable species finally branched off from Homo habilis, Homo erectus. Erectus left almost every one of its ancestors' weaknesses behind. They stood taller, 5 to 6 feet on average, a full head above the 4-foot habilis. Their feet finally had that crucial arch and a proper Achilles tendon, meaning they could run. Not just sprint, but cover mile after mile for hours if they had to. Much of the dense body hair their ancestors carried thinned out, replaced by skin that could sweat efficiently across its whole surface. which meant Homo erectus could stay active through punishing midday heat that left other predators panting in the shade. Their brains crossed 900 cubic centimeters. Their stone tools evolved from crude flakes into genuinely sophisticated symmetrical hand axes. Where Homo habilis had lived largely off other predators' leftovers, Homo erectus began hunting in organized groups of its own, becoming a predator in its own right instead of waiting on the sidelines. Decades later, in 1984, a member of Richard Leakey's fossil hunting team named Kamoya Kimeu would find one of the most complete early human skeletons ever recovered, a Homo erectus boy near Lake Turkana in Kenya, still known today as Turkana Boy. A reminder that this same family and the researchers around them kept turning up the next chapter of this story for generations. But Homo erectus's single greatest achievement wasn't a sharper axe or a faster stride. It was mastering something no animal on Earth had ever controlled before: fire. The absolute darkness that had meant near-certain death for Homo habilis for the better part of 1 million years stopped being something to fear. Predators that had once ruled the night backed away from the flames. Fire brought safety, and cooking meat over it meant far less energy spent on digestion, energy that could go straight toward building an even more capable brain. Homo erectus became the first human species in history to walk out of Africa entirely, eventually spreading across huge stretches of the ancient world. For a long stretch of overlapping time, Homo habilis and Homo erectus shared the same landscape. But habilis, with all its old vulnerabilities, simply couldn't keep pace with what its own descendants had become, and it faded quietly into extinction, not defeated exactly, but outcompeted by its own children. From Homo erectus, across hundreds of thousands of years and countless further generations, came the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and eventually us. Homo sapiens. Go back, for a moment, to that night 1.8 million years ago. That small, 4-foot figure, one of a species whose members lived, on average, barely past their 12th birthday, surrounded on every side by a world built almost entirely out of ways to die. Nature hadn't given them speed, it hadn't given them claws or fangs or wings. What it had given them, in the end, was something none of those apex predators possessed: the willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder with each other, and the ability to think as a group instead of as individuals. Every night, they went to sleep with no guarantee they'd open their eyes again. And still, every morning that they did, they picked their stone tools back up, gathered together, and went out to survive one more day. The breath you're taking right now is the end result of that refusal to quit. Everything we call civilization sits on top of the fact that the weakest, most outmatched creature in that entire ecosystem simply would not stop fighting for one more sunrise. Maybe that's the oldest definition of what it means to be human there is. Not strength, not speed, not sharp teeth, just the stubborn refusal to go down without a fight.